So, Chris, this week we're going to chat about the First Fruits Part 2.
Part 2.
So we talked about Part 1 last week, and we're going to talk about the last 3 days being created in His image, and so we'll touch on a little bit of that. We're going to give ourselves 15 minutes to powwow.
Yeah.
Since sometimes we could use a clock, starting now.
Good.
So did you have any thoughts as you were kind of finishing this plan from the First Fruits?
Sometimes. So it seems like that plan was like a year ago in my mind.
I know.
And I don't know why. It just kind of feels that way. So this week I had a conversation with my family where I related this created in His image stuff to a sermon that I heard some years ago that talked about honoring people.
Yeah.
And the pastor that was teaching that, and I loved this, he said, people are worthy of honor because God is worthy of honor and they're created in His image.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And, we think a lot of times, like honor is a word that we, in English, we conflate it with like respect or sometimes even love or whatever. Yeah. And I think honor is good to kind of lift out of that. Respect, I think you could argue is an earned thing. I recognize what you're doing in your life. I see what kind of character you have. I see whatever, and I respect that.
Right.
And so respect might be more of a reactive feeling or opinion even about someone. But honor, you come automatically with honor. Every person comes automatically with honor because they're made in the image of God.
Yeah.
Now, it's likely that people don't always behave honorably.
Right.
Right?
But you seem to be. This is interesting because I was gonna kind of ask a different question, which we'll get to
Sure.
I think in a little bit. But you're coming at it more so, less kind of from I'm created in God's image. What does that say about me? Although I'm sure you'll get there a little bit too. But
for sure,
you're thinking more right now. Okay, everyone, right, is created in God's image. So how do I view them?
Yes.
Which is a good way. Both important ways to kind of think about this. But as you think about what does it mean to be created in God's image, imagining that everyone else is created in God's image.
Completely. And so there's two things I really want to say that extend out from that. One of them is I had more conversation than with just one of my children who asked about when Jesus, was kind of mincing words with the Pharisees, and they said, well, which commandments should we follow? Which are the important ones? And Jesus basically said, you should know, but then he finally says to them, love God,
right, and
then love people. Those are the first two.
Right.
Everything else follows suit. And if you take the language that's in pretty much every translation of that second commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. And so one of my kids said, well, what if you struggle to love yourself?
Yeah.
And I said, I recognize that, and here's where created in His image plays into that, is that God made you, right? And you've heard me say this to students before, so I'll say this to Teresa. God wanted a Teresa McFarland,
right?
And now He has one, and He's pleased, right? You were wanted first. Angie, you were wanted first. And then God created you. He planned you, and then He created you, and He delights in you.
Okay,
That's what the word says, delights in you.
Let me switch gears because I like this. I like the direction that you're going in. And we'll see. But we talk a lot about this on how we kind of want to make things more applicable and personable, right? Because, one of the challenges with small groups and getting together is we talk about these ideas that really require very little vulnerability. And so because we're not vulnerable, we're not honest, we don't talk about practical things, we walk away and we do feel good and it's still helpful. But we don't get to a spot where I know how to encourage you better.
Sure.
And we don't get to a spot where you confess and share with me something that hurts you and that you repent and I remind you of Christ's forgiveness for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are two really big important aspects of small group. So as you're thinking about this and looking at you kind of being created in the image of God, where do you struggle to kind of say, are there areas where you struggle to view yourself that way?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Either for kind of overly or underly. I think you probably know what I mean.
I struggle to, and so, yeah, I appreciate that. For me, I recognize in a lot of ways, what God has given me, right? I recognize the blessing of my wife and my family, and I recognize especially the ones he's dropped right into me, like, the gift of music or worship or those kinds of things. And so I have learned over the years not to downplay the gifts.
Yeah.
Right? I'm created the way I'm created. He's encouraged me and developed me in certain respects, whatever. But where the enemy wants to then get inside my brain is about the value of those gifts.
Is it
right?
for you? Yeah, continue with that thought. But is
Sure.
it for you? Maybe go this way if you want. Is it for
Sure.
you more the value of the gifts or the value of you?
Well, and so that's part of the problem too, right? Because my gifts are in me, given to me by God. They don't define me.
What
Right.
defines you?
My identity's in Jesus, period. If anything that I do speaks of my identity, it's my ability to worship and love him. Now, the vehicle for that, which could be music or it could be painting or it could be writing or just name it.
Yeah.
It could be building things. I don't know.
Right.
Those are different for everybody. And this is a problem in the Western world and probably in other parts of the world that I've never visited, but in the Western world, people, and men especially susceptible to this, that what you do defines you.
Is who you are.
And that's not true at all.
Isn't it?
It's who you are in Jesus, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you're created in his image, and that is, if you take it in that respect, that Teresa is created in the image of God, and he created in her an ability to teach and be a teacher, but that does not define who she is.
Right.
It's Jesus in her that defines who she is. And her exploration of that should be paramount.
Right.
And I'm not picking on you at all, Teresa. I'm just trying to apply it. Right? Like my exploration of music can't be deeper than my exploration of Jesus. Or I'm out of balance.
Yeah.
And I can promise you there were times in my life when that was absolutely true.
Sure.
Right? And then it becomes worship of the thing.
Right.
Right?
Well, that's interesting. It's not quite how I was looking at it. Or
I know
exactly
I always
well,
turn
good.
funny.
No.
ways.
You went where I wanted. It's just something new. Is all I'm saying.
Okay, good.
Not kind of off topic or anything. But
Good.
the yeah, I think I look at this a little bit, and I think about the areas that man, I can one day look at myself and be like, I am just God's gift to this world. I am just phenomenal.
And we go through seasons of that.
And then it's like a week later,
Yep.
what a terrible person I am,
Yep.
And it's not necessarily viewing myself accurately and being kind of created in his likeness.
Right.
And part of it is you have to add the fall into it, and then you have to add redemption through Jesus, right?
Right.
Going to the cross and saving us. And I guess that's a part where, as you go to love your neighbor as yourself and viewing other people through their identity, some people might be better at some things that the world rewards, right? Like you might be a little bit more of a disciplined person, or you might be a little bit more skilled in certain areas, and so the world starts to think of you as a better person. But you have your vices too, right? Everybody has their vices. Everybody has their areas where they disrespect or ignore God in their lives, right? And where they struggle with sin.
Yeah.
And you look at the fact that we were all created, we all fell, Jesus died for all of us,
Yep.
right? There is no logical reason to look at somebody, and I like that you kind of went with honor at the beginning, and to say that they're more deserving of love than anybody else.
Yeah,
and
no.
then following that line of thought, there's no way, no reasonable way for me to think that I'm the exception to that either. I don't deserve love any less than anyone, and I don't deserve love any more than anyone.
Right.
And I might fail at things, or I might be great at things that the world likes, but my identity is the same as
Yes.
yours.
Yes.
Right? Whether I'm good at things, bad at things, recently
Yes.
failed at something big, failed at something small, was hugely successful. And so, when we think about being created in his likeness and our identity, I want to believe that accurately and have a good idea of where I fit in with this world, which is completely even, right? Even, equal to the same amount of love that they deserve, and equal to the same amount of sin and faults that anyone else has. Yeah, and I think that is just one of the really, that's where I go with the thoughts that you were sharing a little bit.
So, yeah, and I appreciate that. I think, so the extension of that conversation, it ends up talking about being able to look at yourself and understand that you're worthy of honor because God is in you, God made you,
Right.
you're
right.
in his image, and therefore the Bible tells us we were made for love, essentially.
Yeah.
We were made to love and to be loved, right? That's the action verb in both of those commandments.
Yeah.
Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And the world even wants to mess with the second commandment and throw yourself on there first and tell you that if you can't love yourself well enough, you'll never be able to love other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's bogus,
Yeah.
right?
You gotta stop thinking you're ever going to accomplish any of this stuff.
No. And see, because the word also, we were made for love, but then the word says, you can't love except that he loves you first.
Right.
And he does.
Right.
Right? So that's, again, the source. We
Right.
go back to the source. Right? Do I want peace? We need to go to the Prince of Peace. Do I want faithfulness, kindness, gentleness, self-control? Whatever.
Right.
You got to go to the Spirit. You got to go to God and get it from the source.
Right.
Right. So someone told me this because I've suffered from self-esteem issues. I still kind of do, but it was strong
Yeah.
right as I was returning to church. So I was like 30.
Yeah.
And someone was praying with me, and it just broke me down because what they said was, God views you a certain way, and you looking at yourself with loathing says to God that he's a liar.
There you go.
And he's not only is he not, but he can't.
Right.
Therefore, what God says about you is the only true thing that's
Right.
about you. You can wrestle with it,
Right.
but you can't win the argument, and you can't dwell in a place that says, I don't love myself.
Right.
You can't dwell in that place.
Well, this is why we've talked about this before, but this is why it's so valuable to have that good foundation and that kind of good understanding of the Bible. It's why we want to read the Bible daily, even if we're not getting anything out of it.
Right.
Because it will come back to us later, and that knowledge is pretty useful, even if you're not feeling it.
Right.
Right? Because there's going to be times where I don't feel like I'm super valuable to God.
Can't
Guess
even trust your
what, though?
feelings, right? You really can't. But yeah, you're right. Guess
God,
what?
God says you are valuable.
I delight in you. I wanted you.
Right.
I created you. You have purpose.
So if you don't feel it, you have to rely on that word and on that foundation that you've built up, because there's a time where you're going to fail, or there's a time that you're going to hugely succeed, and either one of those can be a problem to make you think that you're something other than your identity. And your feelings, and maybe even other people, will tell you that feeling is accurate. You're right, you're not valuable, or you're extremely valuable, and you're going to have to rely on that foundation of, no, this is what God says about me.
Yeah.
I don't feel it right now, but it's what he says, so it must be true.
It's actually, I would argue that it's
Final
pretty-
thoughts.
Final thoughts. I would argue that it's pretty rare to have your feelings line up with the truth about who you are.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare. And so it's better to listen to God and, I'm going to say, just nod and smile. Be like, okay, you say I'm fearfully and wonderfully made.
You're right.
I'm going to say yes to that. And
Yeah.
some days I'm going to feel not in line with that at all. And some
Yep.
days I'm going to be closer.
Right.
But you say, therefore. And see, and we see the beginning of, well, the seed of that is even planted when they'd been fishing all night. Remember this story?
Yeah.
They'd been fishing all night, and they're bringing the nets in. They got nothing. And Jesus says, why don't you
Cast
throw it
them
on
out.
the other side of the boat? And the reply comes, we've been fishing all night, but because you
Yep.
say,
Yep.
we'll do it.
Yep.
That's where we have to be.
Yes. Yes. Oh man, that's good. That's a good way to end it, man. Good thought. Good thought. This goes into so many different areas. That concept of trusting what he says, but also testing it out so that you trust it, right?
For sure.
Is hugely valuable. Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up with that for this week, and we'll look forward. Next plan next week is I don't remember right
The one
now.
you just sent.
Yeah, the one I just sent.
So accept the invite and let's talk about it next week.
No, next week actually is not the one I just sent.
No?
Next week is the one. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Reverse the curse next week.
Good.